There have been several times the last few years even where I was just having a moment, man, like a bad moment.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are here live. I'm with the one and only Matt Amuchastegui. Matt, how you doing today?
I'm good, Oliver. How are you, buddy?
I'm so good. This has been a long time coming, man, having you on the show. How long have we been trying to make this happen for?
Oh, since Austin, like months, but my second bout of COVID or my third bout, my voice was just like hash. It was just gone. I wasn't feeling well, but I could have got through it, but I didn't want to ruin anything, man. So it's been a while.
Yeah.
I'm glad you found room for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. Like as soon as because we were kind of at the mastermind together. We were both speaking there, and what was cool is one of the things I was saying when I was there is yes, I came to speak, but I'm there to listen. Right. And I
Right.
found that well, you were, I think, were the first person I even spoke to that there was that people had such brilliant stories. And like, regardless of if they were successful or not successful, it doesn't matter. Just like the way that people kind of go through their life, like the experiences that have happened to them and the way it shapes the way that they go through every single day of their life. Again, regardless of how successful or not they are from a monetary perspective, it was just fascinating. And the first conversation that we had, you just had so many stories and you'd learned so many lessons from there. And that's kind of why today in the conversation, I wanted to talk about experience and preparation and kind of how your experiences in life basically shapes who you are. So without further ado, I guess the first obvious question is, what is your story and how did you get here?
Oh man, how long do we have? so, uh, no, man, I see myself as a lucky dude, fortunate. Also had plenty of struggles, uh, you know, brought up in a good family though. Mom and dad were married, no divorce there. I wouldn't say a lot of childhood trauma or anything like that. I had a pretty good upbringing. But went to college, U of O, got my college degree. Somewhere along the way, and I made some good money. Real estate primarily. I did a lot of construction work, from here and there, building houses. Bridge work in the summers of going to college. So I was always doing construction and then went into building houses. But it's hard to jump around here, man. But somewhere along the way, like in short, I was doing well and doing fine. I think I got this entitlement feeling or something, right? It was really weird. Like, I'm not going to say I had this victim mentality, but I would see others people's success. And instead of like cheering them on, um, it could have even been my own family, right? It could have been my brother. Like, instead of cheering them on, I would get like envious or jealous or upset. And like, it started to like fester something unhealthy. I mean, I didn't realize it then, but it took me a while, bro, to like see that and see that was holding me back and really take responsibility for me. That was a big one for me. And then, as I mentioned there at the place, like realize that our life experiences, as long as we can use our life experiences to beat us down into the corner, and this happened, so now I'm only this, or okay, this happened, so I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to use that. See this situation. I'm going to use what I learned here, and I'm going to go this way. But in short, man, I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I've got three awesome kids, a beautiful wife, successful real estate business. I'm in the cannabis industry as well. And I put my heart and soul into both of them, man. I care about my employees. I care about my agents that are on my team. I care about the customers I serve in both industries. Ultimately, I think I'm an empathetic dude. And as you probably saw at the mastermind, I'm emotionally wired. And it took me a while I'm okay with that, right? Not all dudes are, or whatever. But yeah, so I believe that's part of what makes me do a good job sometimes. And probably sometimes I don't separate as well from a business decision as well, right? I get too emotionally involved. So while I never compromise like doing the best thing for my client, I think sometimes I probably lose a little more sleep, so to speak,
Right.
and
Yeah.
or worry probably more because of that. But
Do you think that that kind of emotional wiring that you had to do with these feelings of, and again, just using your words when you said envy that you were feeling to seeing other people successful, like the fact that you're emotionally charged, obviously it has its benefits, but it also has its challenges.
yeah, I think so, man. And I think it didn't help that I was also like not, in those moments. I think I saw people excelling or doing well when I wasn't, or I was struggling, or um And I wish I could have stopped it then. I would have saved myself a lot of time, because I still went on. I still worked. I still did these jobs. I still brought in income. I still worked for other people. I still provided for my family. We never got to homelessness or didn't get embattled in drug addictions or anything. I already, had some of that earlier in my life. I don't know. Maybe, yeah. I think maybe the emotional wiring part of me was maybe that drove the envy part, but I also think it's probably what helped me like accept that it's everything that's happened okay, and it's okay that I'm where I'm at, and it's okay that maybe I wasn't at the top yet, and it's okay to compare myself to people, like to have these. It's okay to have these goals and these benchmarks. Just make sure they're the right bench. Like,
Right.
for instance, if I want to go shoot basketballs and I want to play basketball and coach my kids' basketball team, I shouldn't compare myself to Michael Jordan, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm always going to be like, yeah, right. Like in our era, Michael Jordan was the guy. It wasn't LeBron James. It was Michael Jordan. He was a man, right? So I've learned a lot about that. And I think some of that before too was like the lack of knowledge of knowing who to compare to and how to compare to. The biggest person I compare to now is the guy in the mirror, man.
Yeah.
I'm my biggest adversary right now, for sure.
I think that's also a challenge, is the reconciliation that everyone has to do of like, how do you acknowledge the greatness of other people and use that as inspiration without comparing yourself as if it's like all linear, as if you're like racing someone. So you could look at Michael Jordan and basically acknowledge the fact that the guy could shoot basically 90%, let's say, free throw percentage with his eyes closed. You can look at that and be amazed by it and use that as inspiration, but then also at the same time have the self-awareness to be like, well, we're not going to get to that point, and even if we do, like, that's fine. I'm never going to be Michael Jordan now, but like, just to see somebody and appreciate his craft and the attention that he kind of puts into that, that's also something that I think is challenged. Do you have any way that you kind of overcame that and were able to look at other people that were quote unquote more successful than you with a healthy lens?
Well, dude, not only that, even people that weren't. So one thing in the last few years, I would say probably around 2017, 2018 or so, because that's when I got licensed in Oregon. And that's when I experienced this other growth, this new, like this success path, I guess. I became humble enough to know that I didn't know everything, that I didn't know everything, and that I could learn from anybody. Like at the mastermind, everybody that spoke, I got something out of, and not just on stage. There was a brand new guy, kid there, came there from college, didn't have his license yet, was considering getting a license. And he was asking me things and talking to me about things, and it was reigniting things I thought about in my brain. And so like at some point, Oliver, 5, 6 years, and maybe beyond that, before that, but it really resonated that everybody has something to offer.
Yeah.
Like everybody has their life experience that can provide something. And so, yeah, when I see someone talk about getting 50 million in sales, or I see in real estate, let's say, or their team does 150 million, I don't find myself going, oh, well, you're in this zip code, or really easy, because no, I'm like, okay, so how did you do that? That's really
Right.
like, that's awesome. Good for you. And I want to know what it's about. And sometimes it's about the person, their character. Sometimes it is about the zip code. Sometimes it's about their strategy. Sometimes it's how they get in touch with their clients. So having to summarize your question, having the humility to realize I don't know everything, and I can learn from anybody, and I've got to stay teachable. That's a big thing for me now. It's a big thing I preach to my agents is we have to stay teachable, because if not, we could miss out on a moment of legitimate learning and growth, I think.
So I want to basically showcase how that sort of humility that you're talking about right now is actually translated into tangible results for you. So could you tell us a little bit about your metrics for success, like what you guys are at right now, about your brokerage, the people on your team? Like, what kind of success have you been experiencing because you've kind of implemented these lessons that you're discussing right now?
We've got nine team members. What's really cool, my sales are going to be a little less this year than they were last year. So from 2017 to 2018 to 2019 to 2020, every year I grew more and more and more. And I had this goal. I want to be the number one agent in my brokerage, or in my town, in my association. And that's changed. But that was all because it's Tony Robbins' book, and I was trying to do this far out goal. It wasn't possible, right? And I put it on a post and I put it in my mirror. But not to go off on a tangent here. My team, there are several members on my team. I believe there's 3 that are outperforming themselves. As of October, one of them had already sold more than they sold all of last year. This is 2022, mind you. It's supposed to be a down year. The market's coming out. The sky is falling. Interest rates are up. And one of my agents, even she was doing less, she's already done more in 10 months. The other one had doubled her volume that she did in a year by October.
Wow.
There's another one doing the same or about the same, and I'm going to do a little less. And I couldn't be more excited because there was a shift a few months ago where I really started focusing on the team. I started bringing people in once a week. I'd like to have you come in once actually, or once a month to the podcast, talk to the team, people that knew more than I did, bigger agents than me, bigger brokerages than me. I really wanted to try to focus on uplifting them and us and marketing more as a team. And it's actually really cool to see my other agents succeeding. Like my goal next year is not, I want to do 100 million 1 year with my brokerage. That'd be great. But my goal next year is for each of my agents, to be in the top 25 or something like that. I want all of us to be in the top 25 of our agents. I want all of us to get over 10 million in sales where we're at. So how I track the metrics, it's basically just sold volume, man. I don't do the track the phone call to track the touches or anything like that. I look at your sold volume. I don't look at pending volume because we don't like to count commissions. I know everybody does it, but you don't like to count the closings until they're done.
Right.
Everyone's different. And so you can think something's totally fine and life happens. But that's how I track it. I track the solds.
I like that you talk about the pending. Like I remember when I first got into what I do, and I would talk about sales like that. This person definitely interested, so they're going to move forward with us in the next 2 months, whatever it was, or just need to get this in order. Like needs to make sure that their dog gets their haircut tomorrow, and whatever these random excuses were. And in my head, I'll be like, yeah, okay, great. And then you learn very, very quickly that unless it's final, it's not final. Like there's always going to be things coming up. And I think that that's something that happens a lot as well, as people always talk about what's going to happen and it's going to be and it will happen if only this and that. And all of the time, people are waiting for the time to be right for something to happen and for the stars to align. At the end of the day, just go and do it. Which brings me to the next point, is that at our mastermind in Austin, when you were on stage, you said something which I wrote down. I want to say it word for word here because I want to make sure that I'm doing it justice. You said, everything that we've been through is preparing us for what we're about to do. And I think that this is kind of relevant to what we were just discussing when everyone's trying to like make sure that the stars are aligning, that everything is kind of in place before anything happens. And that's how they're going to prepare for their success. But before we kind of delve into that, at face value, what did you mean by that statement?
Man, I remember kind of joking saying, I know that's kind of obvious, right? But I think sometimes we forget that. And it's, for me, we're going through uncomfortable things. It's important to remember that this is a moment. It's a building moment, right? I call it building character. And sometimes it's building too much character. Like, when are we going to get done building character and going through the crap and just be at this spot? And we're never going to be there. I could just see it, like specifically, if I hadn't have built this relationship with a gentleman years ago, like in my childhood, and then later on gone and went fishing on his dock with him, and then stayed in touch with him later, would he have reached back out to me when he wanted to list his house, and it would be my first house to sell in Oregon, and help me kind of get my license in Oregon, get going again when that was time, and kind of be that encouraging, motivating extra little push I might have needed because I got in before it went nuts for a few years, so like, I just see it now. Everything is experience. In the cannabis industry, my current business partner was a guy, I had a nutrient company at the time. I met him trying to sell him nutrients. It didn't work out. I was having to hound the guy, and the nutrients didn't work. But when it came time for the dispensary, because that was something I was looking at since about 2013, because I believed in the benefit of cannabis if used correctly, personally. And so, which stems back to my dad's pancreatic cancer and a whole other thing, brother. But what I'm getting at is, I met this person doing something else, and we built this relationship. And then when it was time for this other thing to come up, he was one of the first or second people I reached out to, and it was good timing, and it worked out. And now we've done a very successful deal. So without taking it word for word and saying, hey, I meant just what it said, like it was, we go through these stages, and if I can somehow remember that, okay, this stage right now, I don't know how this is going to help me later, but there is going to be a later. This isn't the end of my story. This is a part of my story. And it's sad because some people get to these points and it becomes the end of their story, right? And so that's what it was for me, is holding on, knowing that this is going to be a part of my story later, and it's going to help. And it holds true in real estate transactions. Like every other transaction, it used to be like every fifth transaction, something new would come up, a different scenario. Now it's every other transaction, there is something different happening. And so having the mindset of, okay, this is preparing me for later, it does help you, but then there's always another side thing on top of that. So, but yeah,
So I like
kind of a long answer to your question.
No, I like
Go
the
ahead.
word that
Sorry.
you used this when you said story, because that's kind of the way that I like to visualize things as well, is that it really is a story. And man, if I like had a dime for every time I said this, but we are like a character in a book or in a movie. And when something pivotal happens in a movie and you're 20 minutes into the movie, you know it's not the end of the movie. You're not even close to the precipice yet. But in our own lives, we live in our own bubbles, and call it narcissism or call it just the way that God made us, whatever it is, but we are the story, and right now is the precipice, whatever that right now looks like. And only when you can look back at it do you realize, oh, that wasn't a precipice. We're like not even up to the challenge yet of the movie. You know what? We're so early on. And I think that
Right.
one of the things is that it's easier for people to have that sort of like to step back and look at something objectively and to realize without being so emotionally attached when something either neutral or positive happens, to say, oh, that was a stepping stone for something that's going to be even greater. I hear that. And I think the challenges, and this is something that really impressed me about you and your approach, is it's difficult when something challenging happens to step back and say, this isn't my precipice. And I don't want to get into something if you're not comfortable, but you mentioned something about your father, and I know that you had some other challenges, let's say, in your life, which kind of got you to where you are right now. If you wouldn't mind kind of talking to us a little bit about that and how it actually affects you and how it continues to affect you and influence you on a day-to-day.
Yeah, sure. Losing my dad to pancreatic cancer, several years ago, 8-ish years ago. That was obviously tough. He was a mentor, but here's the deal. At the time when he was alive, I don't know about you, and but like, do we always listen to our parents? My mom's still alive, thank God. I'm very blessed for that. But no, we don't listen to them all the time. So when they're around, when he was around, he had this good advice, and I would listen sometimes. I wouldn't. I'd find out he was right most of the time because he had life experience. He had his further along in his story, right? And when I didn't realize at the time, but I think what happened when he left, although my mom was a mentor, he was a different type of mentor to me, and I didn't have a mentor anymore. And it took me a while. It was almost like I was lost, man. I found my way. I still survived. I built houses. I did these things. But it made me start looking, and it took me a minute to realize, okay, people do need some guidance, right? So I'm not really strong-willed. Like, I'm just going to do it all on my own. I'm going to come up with all my own brilliant ideas. We all have good ideas. And so I started reaching out to reading these motivation, several books, let's say. And that was a big part of it, because even though my dad knew a lot, there were other people that knew more things. So instead of one opinion, now I was getting like 4 or 5 or 6 different opinions of brilliant minds of these billionaire people and their knowledge of how to navigate life. I can tell you one thing that isn't really business related, but it is very much life related. After my dad passed, something about a white feather came about our family, right? And the saying is, when you see a white feather on the ground or on the curb or by, that it's your loved one saying hello. It's a loved one who's passed away saying hello. And there have been several times the last few years even where I was just having a moment, man, like a bad moment, just a part of the story was just really rough. And I'm like, man, this is just frustrating. This is crappy. For instance, one time we made enough money. We bought this boat. We're out on the lake. We're having a good time. My mom was out there. My kids were out there. We're all there. And I'm on the boat. And my wife's mom is there too. And she said, Matt, you should be really proud of yourself. This is really neat. You should be proud of yourself for this. And I was. And I kept thinking, when my dad died, I wasn't as monetarily successful. Okay. I hadn't arrived yet. I had pretty much come back just to be with him and my mom and try to make something in the town I was in. But I remember being on the boat and thinking, man, Dad, I wish we were here. Okay. I wish you could see the success. And I got back to the truck and I was getting into the truck to go hook up, and there was a white feather right by the tire. And I specifically mentioned, to talk to my dad in this thought process. So one cool thing that came from my dad's passing, several good things, I guess. One, I value life. There's no human that's going to go. I really try to value the time with my kids, but I try to remember to find the white feather in everything, man. And like having a bad day, maybe I don't see the white feather, but it's like, okay, what am I grateful for? What do I still have? Because when I see the white feather and I'm having a bad day, it's like my dad saying, hey, Matt, you're still alive, man. You are still alive. And I'll go one step further. I've only shared this with a couple people, but like I had a dream. I'm a spiritual guy. Okay. I do believe in something after this life. And he came to see me and he told me, he said, Matt, there's this word, it's death. And it's a scary word. And we all know it's there. And it's something we have to go through. He said, but there's this other word and it's life. And we have to live it. You have to live it. Like he was talking to me, like, quit worrying about the bullshit and the little stuff and whether you're doing it right or wrong. Live your life and like as much as you can, because this is it. This is what you get. And I shared that. I woke up, tears rolled, and I texted my family immediately so I wouldn't forget it. But, I got a lot out of my dad from being a son of life's teaching. But if nothing else, it's like, dude, we have this life and we have to live it. And you've talked about experiencing just doing it or waiting for the right time. Like this is the right time right now. It may not be the right time to go out and spend all your money on one thing, but it's the right time to take some action for sure. And so, so that was my most defining moment later, was losing him and finding myself in a different light, right? Like becoming the dad of my family, becoming hopefully what my dad was to me to my family. And then becoming an owner of a couple of companies, and because he owned his company, right? And he was the rock of the family. And so finding myself in that. And I think it's neat because I wasn't always in that position. And so when I'm dealing with other agents or I'm dealing with people that I'm empathetic and I can see where they're at. And I don't like some dictatorship weird model, right? Like acting like we've never struggled before. We've never made mistakes. Like as a leader, if someone just sits there and says, don't do this, I can't believe you did that, dude. If you can't step back and say, oh, wait a minute, I've done that too. Right. Like, yeah. Okay, we're all human. Right. So anyways, I managed to not cry too bad. That's good. I'm not a crier, not a crier, but
not too bad, man. But listen, I think if you can make it through that kind of thing, that's absolutely beautiful though. I guess just to kind of dig a little bit into one thing, it's what if someone feels as if there are no white feathers, as if like nobody's kind of reaching out to them to say like, hey, it's okay. And they do feel isolated and they do feel alone. Like, what would you say to them?
That is a really good question. I've always had faith. And so when I'm in a really dark low, man, I pray to God. There's so many different religions out there, and I wouldn't pretend to even say I know for sure, because no, I don't. But I would say find that, if, and the white feather to me isn't necessarily, so maybe someone didn't have the father figure in their life that they can look back on and shine. But if they see a white feather in the middle of something, like find something in that moment to be grateful for. This is, for example, one time I was playing golf with my brother in Hawaii. I just lost my ball. I was getting all frustrated and pissed off. And we were playing there because my dad liked to play there, right? I go over to where I hit my ball in the rough. I can't find my ball. It should be right there. It wasn't a lost ball. But what's there instead of my golf ball? A white feather. No golf ball, but a white feather. And what that was, Matt, you are golfing with your brother. You are alive. Don't be frustrated. Don't be worried. In Hawaii, yeah. Enjoy the moment, man. So like, I guess what I would say to that person is, I bet that person who's at a low could probably look around in their life and see several things to be grateful for.
Right.
And that's really hard to do sometimes. Because I've been at a super, super low point too before, in my life. Like, but man, not having someone, I've felt like I've had no one before in certain situations, actually. Like let's say you're having trouble in a relationship or something, right? Or your business. and you can't talk to anybody about it because you don't want anybody to know. Like I could relate to that.
Yeah.
And sometimes, man, we just have to hold on too, right? Like it's because it will change. I had a guy who was a mentor for a while, and he said, put one foot in front of the other, and it'll get different. It'll change. And right now, it sounds like different is good, right? So if someone's sad, they're in a funk. What do I do now? Well, one foot in front of the other. Keep your head up and get to the other side. It'll get different. And it sounds like different would probably be good in that situation.
Right. There's a couple of points that you made
So-
there. Like I'm trying to like compartmentalize that I remember to kind of bring them all up. But one of them that you mentioned was, well, like when you're talking about the mistakes, right? Like that if your leader isn't
Right.
going to be able to talk about their mistakes and they're going to act as if they've never been through them, I think people forget that there is a middle ground. Like I don't think Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, where you're promoting your services, is the place to basically promote to the world, say like, I'm struggling and everything's really difficult for me right now. Like, because then you're basically just announcing it to the world. And I think people think I'm either going to do that or I'm faking it. And it's like, no, it's a very healthy dynamic to say Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, that's where I promote myself. And I have to not put up a front, but you're a businessman. You don't go into work one day and then start telling everybody else in your office about an argument that you had with your wife. And like, you don't think, but if I don't do that, then I must be an inauthentic person. Like, no, there's just a time and a place. But that does certainly mean that when you are there for people and somebody's struggling, or even if they're not struggling, you know, as somebody who's been there before, who's experienced it, you know that they will feel these feelings of debilitation or whatever word you want to use. They'll feel that. And so for you to be able to preempt that and say, let me tell you something. This is not an easy game. And although I may, let's say, be successful, or even if you want to get really vulnerable, say, although I may look successful, it comes with a whole lot of challenges that maybe to everybody else might seem trivial, but they're far from trivial. So I was speaking to a friend of mine who's in a similar business than me, different industry, but similar kind of like marketing coaching idea. And I said to him that if I could look back at myself from like a year and a half, 2 years ago, right? Not a long time, but long enough that things have changed. And I started telling myself then the challenges that I face today in my business, I would laugh at myself and then probably like slap myself upside the head. But that doesn't make them any less real that I'm struggling with right now. You know what I mean? So
Exactly.
then for me to be able to deal with, or to talk to, in this case, him, say to him, like, you've got a long road ahead of you and you're going to feel alone and you're going to feel isolated sometimes. And that's another thing. Here's another crazy thing. When you start to experience some success, your marketing strategy has to be to promote your success. You have to, right? You have to show this is what we've been able to do. We're sending clients. The problem with that is that people are making assumptions and they're associating you subconsciously all the freaking time. And so if you're promoting your success online, everybody just knows that's how successful this person is. And it becomes very isolating because if you start to struggle with something, you can't talk about it very much with very many people except for your core group of people. Because if you talk about it with somebody that doesn't really know you so well outside of Instagram, outside of Facebook, outside of LinkedIn, then they start to question everything. And it's like, well, maybe you weren't really successful. It's like, no, I am and I was, but this is how I feel today. And I feel like what you're saying, the experience as a leader that you've had to be able to step back and say, no, we struggle also. It's such an important thing because in these feelings of isolation that people will feel when it's like, but I'm talking about my success online. Now I'm not as successful as I was, or maybe, I don't know, I feel like an imposter. Who the heck do I talk to about it? For you to then come in and say, you're not alone. And part of the game is to promote your success, but also to be vulnerable with certain people when you're not successful. I think that is such an essential thing to be able to be successful. And I think that your team is extremely lucky to have somebody like you who is aware and vulnerable enough to kind of identify the things that they need to hear and the ways that you need to be vulnerable and to share that with them.
Right. Well, so I couldn't agree more. Like, I was just talking about this with a friend of mine. I personally think social media is a place to go. Like, during the elections, I was guilty of it. I'm not going to lie, right? I would post something about liberal, conservative, whatever it is, right? My opinion, I impose my will a little bit. Sometimes I was doing it to stir things up, but I agree. I don't think social media is the right place to get like vulnerable, talk about struggles and this and that. I mean, and social media has been a pivotal part of such an integral part, I should say, of of my ability to grow. Right. So it's still using the sphere of influence, but with social media, you can reach out and touch a sphere in like 30 seconds. Whereas before you had to send a postcard, and I still do the postcards, and I wish I had more time to go have lunches and dinners with people more, because I built so many great relationships. But I agree with you, man. Social media should be about yourself. Share your successes, because it's also about putting positive out there too, right? And you'll kind of almost see it sometimes, like if you just share the negative's all you have. And I say this, and I'm knocking on wood, because I know now something, like, because I'm talking so positive and Sam being so positive, something's going to challenge me out there. There was a minister I listened to one time. He said, I'm talking about forgiveness this year. So I know something bad's going to happen to me and my family. I'm going to have to forgive somebody for it. Right. So I always get nervous when I start talking about something, man, because it's like, okay, how am I going to be tested? What I just said I handle, how am I going to handle it? But yeah, man, I get vulnerable with my team. I've even, talked to them when I want to run meetings. It's like, hey guys, I care about you. The truth is, I care about you guys. I want to see you succeed. That's what this whole thing is about. And if it's not flowing, we need to figure it out. I want to make sure it's flowing for you guys. That's the whole goal. Is I want you to want to be here and want to succeed and want to do well. But yeah, man. So social media to me is not where you go. And I've never been in that position where I haven't had someone, but I at least have someone to reach out to and talk to. But I think for people to believe there's no struggles, and this might be where you're going, I think it might be what limits people from even trying, is I think they think, oh, the person just always had this, or they had this one up. They haven't known struggle. Everything's been handed to them, or look how easy it is for them. And it's like, they're probably just not choosing to share with you, like, the personal mental struggles they've had that day, like about anything, questioning life, questioning faith, questioning existence, relationships, being a father, a mother, any of that stuff. So I totally agree with what you said there, man. 100%. I'm grateful for social media.
Sorry, go ahead. To kind of go deeper into just that one part, like, if your job online is, let's say you are an entrepreneur, you're an adversity coach for entrepreneurs, let's just say, then, like, don't kid yourself that your vulnerability is like brave and courageous and heroic, although it may be, don't get me wrong, but it very much fits your business model to be vulnerable and brave and heroic and everything like that. It fits what you're doing. It fits your narrative. And there's no shame in it fitting your narrative whatsoever, but you're doing your job and you're talking to your people in a way that they want to be spoken to. If they didn't want to be spoken to like that, if that wasn't beneficial to them, you wouldn't do that. So let's say, well, I'm just going to talk for myself, right? I help real estate agents succeed. Let's say if I'm struggling with my business, for me to then come out and be like, hey, everybody, I'm struggling with my business. Business is hard and I'm just not finding it very rewarding right now. Like, that's a very bad thing for my business to say something like that. So I will not. It doesn't fit with my model. I will talk to my wife about it. I will talk to friends about it. Some very, very, very careful who I decide to talk to about it, though. But if your model is, again, to be vulnerable in front of the masses and to say you're not alone and that is your model, then that's fine. And there's a time and a place for that. But again, I think it's like people like want to be this brave warrior on social media. And so you've got kind of two extremes. There is a middle, but the two extremes are, I'm going to be this brave warrior on social media and basically my life is everyone's life and there's not going to be any filter. And that's good because I'm honest and authentic. And it's like, okay. But then there's the other extreme, which is like everything's perfect and everything's great. And look how unbelievable everything is for me. And it kind of goes beyond the realm of your actual brand. And instead, you're basically just trying to, aggrandize yourself. And like that middle ground is really, it's like, where is your middle ground? And I think that that's a lot of the challenge. And for you, it sounds like your middle ground is social media is a place for me to promote myself. My friends and family are the places that I open up entirely. And my people on my team are the people that I open up enough for them to not feel isolated, to allow them to be successful. But it seems all very calculated and sort of engineered to be successful to everyone.
Yeah, I think I try to have balance, and I have shared some pretty intimate things on there, typically about a memory about my dad or something on his passing, or maybe on a Father's Day, I will choose, and get on there. But I typically do it if I think it's going to help people.
Right.
That is literally, if I'm going to open up and I'm going to share something intimate with myself, I'm doing it because I think it's going to help at least one person. Someone's going to read that and go, oh, okay, awesome. Right. Like, yes. But there's got to be balance on there to me. Like I talk about my family and then I talk about work and I try to keep it separate. And lots of times it goes, it intertwines a little bit too. But as I said the mastermind one time, and I think it's extremely important for real estate agents, for everybody in their sphere to know they're a real estate agent. Everyone needs to know when they think of Oliver's a real estate coach or a marketer, or he's going to help you organize your systems. Or Matt, when they think of Matt, what does Matt do? Well, not just some real estate agent. I kind of want them to know that he's a real estate agent. He's a family guy. He cares about his community, because that's who I am. And then if somebody chooses not to use me as an agent, I want them to not choose me for the right reasons. I want them to say, you know what? I actually don't want necessarily a guy that's too caught up in the family and the community and like coaching the basketball and all these things. I want someone that's just going to do this real estate thing. That's it. That's all. Their kids are grown. Don't have to worry about it. And that's fine. But what's better about that is I want people to choose me and like all that stuff about me. So when I'm pretty genuine on social media. I don't pull the, there might be some personal things I don't put on there for obvious reasons, but like I want people to want to work with me because of who I legitimately am. And so I do try to share as much as possible, including, which I don't do a lot anymore, my political and religious beliefs. At one point I didn't do it. It's like, oh, well, you don't want to lose somebody if you say you're a Christian or you're not a Christian, or, you're Jewish or you're, a Mormon or whatever it is, or because you're a conservative or a Democrat. And I did have one person tell me that she wasn't going to use me again because I voted for Trump, that I was a conservative. And it just made her feel devalued as a human being. And so at the end of the day, do you want to work with someone who, if they knew who you really were, wouldn't want to work with you? I know money's important, but the answer to me is no. I wouldn't want that, So I think social media is definitely a tool, man. And using it correctly is super important. And I don't know if I have or not, but it's like and now it's this whole other world that, let me ask you this. Do you think it's ever going to go anywhere? Are we ever going to go backwards from here? Like, and what do you think's next? What's next for us, technology, social media wise? Like, what's next?
Well, social media, no, it's not going anywhere, because even if, let's say, we legislate it to the end of the world and we basically monitor it, it's not going anywhere because it's here now. It's like cars aren't going anywhere. Like, you can change them, but they're not going anywhere. So no, it's not going anywhere. I think where next from here, either it gets more and more invasive in more and more ways and start to learn and pick up more and more information from us, or somebody comes around to realize, like, hang on a minute, like, there's a lot of people that know a lot of information about a whole group of people. So maybe we should kind of pull back a little bit on that. But at the end of the day, like, I don't know. It's like let's say you used to have only like sedans and now you have SUVs as well. Like, it's still going to be a car, but the body might look a little bit different. It might change the way that we structure it, but no, it's all social media is mass communication, and mass communication obviously isn't going anywhere.
No. And it's like cell phones, how they evolved, like how they've gotten better from when like they were like the CB radios. So I'm kind of interested. You see TikTok coming out. There's these new TikTok, and that's kind of like this evolution. It's like, oh, people just like watching videos. They just like music. And so it'll be interesting to see how it evolves, if it evolves, as we evolve too, man, for sure.
So I want to get into actually the title of the podcast, which is the only preparation that we needed is experience, because we spoke a lot about experience, but we didn't really touch so much into how experience is preparation. So I mentioned this very briefly, but one of the biggest things I find that plagues realtors, but although entrepreneurs in general, is that every single thing has to be done in a certain way, prepared, that all of their ducks are in a row. And then once this and that and the entire stars align and the world is in perfect shape, then we can move forward. And the premise of your statement initially, that everything that you've been through is preparing you for what you're about to do, it screams, stop planning, just go and do it. And that is your preparation. So what do you think, or how do you think this problem manifests in real estate, that people are over preparing and not taking enough action? And what do you suggest people do to kind of overcome that challenge?
Yeah, man. I have a great example. I had met people in 2020 that were going to buy a house. 20, yeah. And they said, the prices are just too high. We're going to wait for them to come down. We're going to wait. And then it was actually 2019. And then 2020 rolls through. And I hear from them almost 2 years later, and they come back, and these people, they end up using me to purchase a home, similar one, and they end up paying like an additional $150,000 over what they would have paid before for the same model. So too much waiting, too much preparation for the right moment to strike is an issue. I've met with people who say, hey, I've been thinking about joining real estate, get my license for a while. And I've had somebody's going to get their license right now and come work for me. I think that's great. I don't think it's a bad time. Is it as good of a time as it was when interest rates were 3% and prices were 20% cheaper? Probably not, but it's still not a bad time, right? So what I've tried to train myself to do, man, and it's really hard because I think all of us, like we're all evolved beings. We all are. We all have this, wherever we originate from, like we all have all this experience and from our ancestors and all these things and our genetics. And I've often said the challenge in life is not like getting things, it's figuring out what we want to do, right? As humans, once we know what we want to do, we have a way we seem to figure out a way to get there most of the time within reason. Winning the lottery, that's different. You know what I mean? Like within reason, a goal. But if every time you had an idea about something, you actually pursued it, I think people would be surprised at how successful they were. Like every and it seems like a lot, right? But it's like every time you got this random good idea, like, man, I should send out coffee cards to everybody. It's not Christmas. I should just do it because it's February. Do it. Right? So I did that. It was not Christmas. We missed our Christmas card because of COVID. We were sick. I sent it out in March and a spring card. Never done that before. It was successful. It was good. It was well reached. I'd got in touch with some people. People have ideas. Maybe it's an invention or something like that. Like if you have, or an idea for a new business or a new way to approach a real estate transaction, like just do it, just check it out. I think we owe it to ourselves to commit to that idea a little bit. Right. Because if we go out there and we put it into action a little bit, case in point, my dispensary wasn't easy. Okay. I started thinking about wanting to own a dispensary back in 2012, 2013. And it literally was, then I was working on it. I would call it a good 5 to 6 years solid, trying to find spots, trying to find locations. And I was being told repeatedly by a lot of people, even close to me, it was a dumb idea. It wasn't going to happen. Too risky, dumb idea. No one wanted to invest. It wasn't going to happen. Even when I got down to the end, some people want to invest. This other gentleman did. But I also didn't give up on it either. And that's another part of like too much preparation. Everything you've been through is teaching you for this other part. And one thing I want to throw in there too is like, it's hard to know when something in the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, something's telling you, hey, this isn't your path. You need to stop. Because I could have easily said, you know what? I shouldn't get my license in Oregon. It's going to be hard. I should keep this safe, secure job I have or whatever at the time. I should quit pursuing something I've been spending years of my life doing and just let go of it because it's not going to happen. And that's my biggest challenge is when does it flow? When is something telling you, no, Matt, Oliver, you got to work harder right here. You've got to push through this because when you do, right, then you're going to one day get to talk about or be about or feel this success or this breakthrough you've had. And that's like knowing when you're supposed to keep pushing or you should just back off because it's just not a good fit. That's tough. That's a tough fit. So in a nutshell though, when we have ideas, when we have a thought, we should pursue them. Like every one of them, at least a few steps down the road, write it down, see if it's viable. What are the pros and cons? What are the benefits? Why do you like this idea? What does it serve? Does it serve a market? And a few steps in, okay, it's not going to work or there's already something there. But man, the only thing I regret coming back to Klamath Falls was not getting my Oregon real estate license as soon as I got back. As soon as I got back, I should have got it. But all screwed up, man. So the market was doing well, but at the time when I first got licensed back in 2010, right? And then then I held a license in Arizona too. So it was California, then Arizona, then eventually Oregon. We were buying foreclosures. The foreclosure stopped. We got outbid by these guys. So I just thought, okay, well, that's it. That's my real estate experience. It was good for a while. Now there's a crash. I wasn't very smart, right? The market around me, the normal was still going to keep growing. But I was so fixated in tunnel vision in what I was doing, what I saw, that I didn't realize all I had to do was pivot. I didn't need to jump ship and run away. I had to pivot. And that's also been like pivoting is important right now. I know it doesn't have to do with everything you've been through, but it does for me, because now as interest rates rise, I am not running away from this real estate market. I'm doing the opposite. I'm trying to hire more agents. I have not cut back on my marketing costs yet. Okay. I have been servicing a lot of buyers. It's time for buyers now. I'm still going to help sellers. I'll be able to help sellers because I've helped so many buyers.
Yeah.
I think there are some agents that may think I'm out of here. It's hard now. But it's funny, in 2021, it was hard for agents. You know why? Because there were so many multiple offers. Yep. So it was so busy in 2021. It was hard. It was a struggle. I'm writing all these multiple offers. It's not, and they're just so busy to run around. And now it's like, well, now I'm not writing any offers, so it's hard. It's a different kind. I'm only writing one offer. It's a different hard. I've got to show 10 houses instead of show 2, right? So everything I've been through is helping me to know that I'm not running away anywhere out of this market. I'm just going to pivot. And maybe the pivot is helping buyers more. And maybe the pivot is spending more time about really finding the want and the need of the client. You know, like, it's going to take a little more, I think, for somebody to want to buy a house now. It has to fulfill more of a need, not just a want. And I think that's going to take more time spent with the client, for sure.
There's so many thoughts that I had on that. Well, first off, there's a reel that it's a real sound, and I just created a reel on it a couple of weeks ago. It's like, I wish there was a way to know that you're in the good old days before you actually leave them. It's from The Office, and it's actually brilliant. But the reality is because I thought about that, and I was like, yeah, like, I kind of wish that was the case. But then it's like, but we do know that it's the good old days, because you'll always look back and think that something wasn't necessarily as bad or as pivotal as it felt at the time. And again, not always the case, but oftentimes, in fact, I would go as far as to say usually, like when you look back, like for example, when you were mentioning 2021, the amount of times that people told me that like it's terrible time for them, terrible market, it's only for the listing agents, and if you're not a listing agent, but now everyone's like, yeah, back then was the golden age in real estate because anybody could kind of be successful. It's like, that's not what you were saying then, and now it's like, oh, it's terrible, man, it's terrible. But now, if you have buyers, you're doing much better than if you have listings, and buyers are easy to find, and there are more ways of generating buyers. So like, wouldn't that be a better time now? And I feel like the way to know you're in the good old days is basically just recognize that these are going to be the good old days. And then in 5 years, they're also going to be the good old days, and you're not going to realize it then. And you're going to think about like it's ever going. And it's basically just the lens that you're looking at everything through. Is it rose colored, or is everything just like terrible and dread and dreary? So that's the first thing. The second challenge that I find is, and I actually kind of like to know your input on this, is as entrepreneurs, as real estate agents, how many conflicting pieces of like Instagram reel quote types of advice are there? For example, all the time you'll hear, whatever you do, don't quit. Just keep going, just keep going, just keep going. And then in the same breath, people will say the most important skill to have is to be able to pivot, right? Or they'll say you have to focus on one thing, pick one thing, focus on that, get laser focused, and then ignore everything else. And then in the same token again, it's don't be afraid to shift gears or to do something else, right? Or notice when the universe is trying to tell you that something is not the right time, or you're not going about this in the right direction. And how many times have you heard people who made that shift? And then they realized that, yeah, they were basically fighting an uphill battle this way. And then as soon as they shifted, everything worked out. And then on the other note, it's like, man, you just got to keep on persevering. Like, how many freaking conflicting pieces of advice are going to be out there before we realize that, like, listen, your experience says that you need to pivot. Your experience says that you need to focus. So everybody has different experiences. But as somebody who is not yet successful, how would one take all of these conflicting pieces of advice and find a story, or find, let's say, the motivation using them in a way that actually works for them and will help them to actually become successful?
Man, that's good stuff. Like, do you remember the Jason Drees guy that was there that talked about, like the mindset and, and framing things, and I'll have to tell him I mentioned him on here, but I really enjoyed what he had to say about energy and all that stuff too. Cause some people believe there's just flow, that you don't have to get up at 5 a.m. and grind and stuff. Oddly enough, and then other people do. For me, And that's what's cool about this and these podcasts, right? Like I'm going to have a different view than someone else just because of my experience, but it doesn't mean that it's the only one. But what I would say is to be able to compartmentalize our dreams and goals sometimes, not put them away, for me anyway, not throw them away, but like, for example, I still want my beach house. A beach house is on my Post-it. It's not going to happen anytime soon, I don't think. But I'm not going to just throw it away and say, you know what, that's a dumb goal. I'm not going to do. That's not happening. So I have to compartmentalize that. It's in the back of my mind. It's still on the Post-it, but I'm not beating myself up when I don't find the perfect beach house for what I can afford right now at this moment in time. So I think to me, maybe the challenge that someone's working on, I think this is what you're asking, isn't flowing perfectly. Like they have a dream to sell the most real estate out of anybody or whatever it is. And they've only got 2 sales, but they've got bills coming up, I think sometimes it's okay to compartmentalize some things and say, okay, so I'm going to do this, but in the meantime, I'm also going to I'm going to paint this house. I'm not going to quit selling real estate. I'm going to paint this house. I'm going to keep doing this on the side. And that's where like that part of like, man, I don't know. To be honest, I don't know when flow is just flowing us to tell us to stop or to keep going. But for me, I've had to compartmentalize with even the real estate stuff sometimes. When there was that break, it was like, okay, it was good then. I think I'm going to get back into it actively, but for now, I'm just going to do this other thing because it's stable for now. And so that would be probably my thought, is like to be able to compartmentalize have this big goal. I'm not meeting the right people yet to help me get to this spot. I haven't made enough money yet to get to this spot. I'm not giving up on this. This is going to be something I continue to talk to people about for years if I have to, until I meet the right person. It's like, hey, that's a great idea. And then you hear the people that it's about putting the right energy out there, and I'm with that too. Like just being positive, make things come to you, like the manifestation approach. It's really hard to manifest $1 million.
Yeah.
But it is interesting how if I really focus on positive, like the type of person I want to be and what it would look like to be that person, which is something that Jason has mentioned, it does help me to kind of look and kind of start to fall into that role, right? Of that. So what I would say to those people too is reach out and be willing to look beyond yourself, even like a book, like someone else, like your coaching or another coach, or like a self-help book. I don't like saying self-help sounds so like weak and whatever, but you know what I mean? Like they're like a motivational book. Matthew McConaughey's book, Green Lights. Have you read that or listened to it on audiobook?
I have kept on. I'm like, almost like as a rule, not actually, but basically as a rule, I don't read actors' memoirs because I just find them, generally speaking, typically obnoxious. But I've heard so many people say so many good things about Matthew McConaughey's book that I'm definitely going to break my rule and go at it, because it just seems like different. Well,
and I think you forget he's a normal dude, success, and went against the grain, did some other stuff for his family or whatever. And, and there's inspiration in there. Dude, ultimately, I think we all have inspiration too. There's part of your story that would inspire me, that has inspired me, right? There's things you said on the stage that I wrote down and took note of that, it's like, hey, you got to have systems work for you, and you need to be able to, delegate, basically virtually delegate things. So you're not wasting time on them. I just think everybody has something to offer, and on some level, somebody has to offer. One side thing I wanted to do once, which it was just an idea, I'm sure someone's already done it, was, basically interview people that had been down on their luck. I don't know if it's homeless people, people that are homeless now or not, like literally go out and meet people, take time. And it'd be a tough question, like, hey, why'd you end up here? Because that's already setting, well, am I in a bad place? But literally just hearing the stories because I think we can learn a lot from people that are doing well, the people that have millions, and also the people that lost it, and like, hey, I made a bad decision once and I couldn't get over it, or I lost some family members and it was so dark I couldn't come out of it. Like, there's no blame. I don't blame anybody there. It's just, I would be interested to see that. Like,
that's a brilliant idea, man.
From all. It's an idea, yeah. But how see? I just thought, now, do I want to pursue it? Okay, maybe. Go like go down that path, but we all have a story, dude. I think we've all been through enough, and I think we can all inspire the people to do more. But for me, someone saying, hey, how do I know when I should stop or keep going? I don't know the answer to that, man.
Yeah.
I think I mean, yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
As we're
what
talking,
I did say on the stage, I remember too, is like, go ahead.
So as we were talking, some of the things I was thinking is that I feel like it's probably less about answering the question itself and more about knowing the exercises to kind of bring the answers out of you. Like, for example, the obvious question is, let's say someone's struggling in business. Should I stop or should I continue? The question isn't, should I stop or should I continue? And to try to answer that question is going to be really difficult. I feel like to find the right exercises to do, like, think about if somebody was asking you that question, then what would you tell them? Or to ask somebody who's totally disconnected from this and is totally not emotionally attached. Or, for example, and I personally don't meditate, but I guess I pray. So that's another version of meditation, or to meditate over it, or to basically find a way, an exercise to engage in, to let the answer kind of come to you. And this is where I think it's like, as much as the people giving advice need to have the humility to recognize that my advice is just my experience and it's not like an end all to be all and you have to listen, otherwise you're going to fail. As much as they have to have the humility, I think the people who are listening to advice also have to have the wherewithal to recognize that this is their experience and I need to respect and acknowledge their experience to the highest extent, while at the same time recognizing that it is just that. It is just their experience. And I think that those two things it's a difficult thing to sort of reconcile, both of those feelings and perceptions. But I think this is where, like, moderation or lack of ego in business is probably one of the greatest traits that one can have, because the only way to make it through this crazy game of entrepreneurship or business is to have that moderation, to have that lack of ego, and which is basically what you mentioned right out of the gate.
Right. And however, you brought up a good point, man. And asking someone that's not in the middle of your situation, like just bouncing off somebody else, has helped me a lot. Like, I've got this going on. It's incredible how hard it is to see the answer when we're right in the middle of it. I don't know about you, like, I've been in that situation, and normally it's a business thing, where it's like, it's just frustrating to me, or it's overwhelming. Or I'm like, man, what should I run it by someone else, whether it's my wife or a friend or my brother? Aaron's been a great, soundboard for me and him both. We both bounce ideas. It's like, sometimes it's incredible how easily and quickly an answer can come about from someone else. It's that simple. But then there's a small part of a person that when someone's like, that's a bad idea, don't do it. That's like like for me, that's been a motivating thing for me. And so every time someone told me, no, don't do it, it's not going to work, I would keep going. Like, it pushed me further. Not always, but there's instances where I'm like, okay, I'm going to let this be the motivating factor. Like, basically someone telling you, hey, you're not good enough, fast enough, good looking enough to whatever. That's motivation. But some people hear that and they go, oh, you're right. Oh, you're right. I'm not. So I'm just going to go ahead and stop now.
And I think that there's all of the things that we mentioned, basically lack of ego, wherewithal, moderation. The only way that you can basically, like, you don't want to say, I'm not going to ask anybody because they're going to just be a hater and then I'm going to stop, because then you're basically not using the asset of somebody else's subjective opinion. But on the same note, you have to be able to leverage that asset while not being debilitated when they say, no, you're not worth it, you're not good enough, and you're not going to be able to make it. And I feel like, again, moderation, wherewithal, lack of ego, those are the traits that are necessary for you to be able to go up to the subjective person and say, what do you think? I want your opinion. And if your opinion doesn't jive with me, then I'm going to just roll and say, thank you very much. I'm going to compartmentalize it over here. And it sounds like, because you were mentioning that when people are sort of hating and they're saying you're not good enough, you're not worth it, or you can't do it, you use that as motivation. And I feel like that way of taking that advice or feedback that you've been given and using that as fuel for you is, and I don't want to be presumptuous, but probably one of the reasons that you are where you are today.
You're right. I've had people joke with me too. My dad used to joke with me. He's like, sometimes I think I should just tell you the opposite of what I really think you should do, and you would do it. And my son Lincoln is the same way, man. Like, and if, so I start to get so mad, but I'm okay with him questioning things. I find I don't like that he doesn't just listen, because I don't want him to run out in the street and not listen. Hey, Lincoln, come here. There's a car coming. That's a big deal where I need him to listen. But that part where they question us a little bit about, well, why do I have to do that? I don't mind that, so to speak, as long as he can get the money before he doesn't listen to a police officer one time, and then he gets a club or something, or gets arrested because the guy told him to pull over and he didn't. He just says no. So that's what I try to tell him now. But he's 6. We have some time. He's 6 years old. Yeah, man. It has been a motivating factor. I'll be honest. When I went to quit, I had a pretty good salary paying job here in town. It wasn't working for me. I was getting physically ill, pretty stressed. I'm not going to blame the company. It was just the environment I was in and where I was at. It just wasn't working. And when I said, I'm going to quit this and get my Oregon real estate license, I'm going to do these things. I'm going to do some self-employed work, but I'm going to get my license again. I didn't have a whole lot of people cheering for me. They didn't think that was a great idea. And it's okay. It's not probably normal to break away and quit this job before you have so much saved in this and that. I did it anyways. It was a struggle. It wasn't ideal, but eventually, like, it worked. You know what I mean? And I think when someone, however small the victory, when we just, I don't want to say trust ourselves. I believe God has a hand in everything for me, and then there's luck. There's also luck, and there's timing is good. But I think when we even have little successes, we can build this sense of like, oh my gosh, I did that. Like, nobody bailed me out. There was no one to bail me out this time, and I found a way through it. That was really hard. And I thought I was going to have a heart attack a couple of times, but I got through it, man. So yeah, dude, it's life experience is huge. And sometimes being told that you can't accomplish something, I think can be great fuel for somebody to do it. But it also depends on what it is. Like, I've had a lot of agents right now are asking, so should I cut back on my marketing? Should I spend less and like kind of lower my overhead? Like, one party's probably gonna say, yeah, like, if you think income's going to drop, it's always a good idea to lower your overhead. Low overhead's a good key to success. But the flip side is, if lowering your overhead lowers your exposure to prospective buyers and sellers, then I probably wouldn't lower your overhead. So, and I'm sure you're getting a lot of that. You mainly talk to real agents, right? Is that primarily the entrepreneurs you work with, or do you
only work
through all the
industries? I only work with realtors.
Okay. Well, yeah, man, I'm excited for 2022. And I said this to somebody once, like, let's just rip the Band-Aid off and get on with it. Like, I think the uncertainty is what has sellers nervous. It has buyers nervous. It has people nervous. It has us nervous. It's like just the uncertainty. So let's just get past the uncertainty. Let's get certain. Let's see where we're at. Like, government, are you going to go to 10% with the rates? Are we going to stay at 6? What's your next thing? If the interest rates don't do it, are you going to maybe think about doing something with the gas prices? That'd be nice. Why are we only focusing on the interest rates? I understand, but it's okay to have, like, is there other things you're going to do? I think that's more, the stock market. Yeah. Is that going to get better? Is it going to stay bear market? That'd be nice. There's just a lot of uncertainty right now. And I'm kind of excited to get past that. There's always going to be some level of it, and just roll with it, man. Figure out what it is. Is it hard or easy? That's fine. Let's go. Let's do it. Because what I learned, man, is even though it changes, there's always real estate needs. People need shelter. They need a home. And so maybe they're comfortable. They don't need to buy right now, but there are going to need to buy homes forever. Until I die, there will be people wanting to buy and sell homes. I would guarantee it.
Right.
It's just the people doing it and the reasons behind it might change a little bit.
So let's say, as a final thing, let's say somebody going into the next year, right? You mentioned 2022 before. I think you meant 2023. So let's say
that's what I meant. Sorry, 23. Yeah.
Yeah. No, just in case someone's listening to this and be like, "Oh, this is an older episode. I thought this was one of the newer ones." Let's say there's an agent going into 2023 who's nervous about it and basically isn't sure where to put their money, if they should double down or double back. And they're basically waiting for external forces to decide what they should do or whatever. They're trying to prepare whatever it is, and they find themselves facing analysis by paralysis, or paralysis by analysis, I think it is. What would you advise of them in order to take their business to the next level?
And that's a really good question, because I've asked those same questions, as a company owner and as an agent, wanting the perfect answer. But what I would give them for advice would be, make absolute certain that everyone knows what you do for a living. Make absolute certain that there's no doubt that when they think of your name, they know what you're doing. And so if that means you have to invest in some marketing while other agents are pulling out of marketing, might not be a bad idea.
Right.
But also be mindful. Don't treat it like a casino, because I wouldn't suggest putting everything you have into marketing right now. I would say really work your sphere and work social media and talk to people like you who know how to utilize social media. If you don't know how to do it, like, use it for the right tool, right? The tool that it is. So my question would be, go after it 100% with every effort. Don't go after it like it's going to be a bad year. Don't go after it like you're not going to make it, right? Go after it. If it's what you want to do, then go after it with the passion that you want to do it 100%. And maybe it means, maybe you don't spend 10 grand a month on marketing right away, or maybe you don't spend everything you have in savings on your extra marketing, but you should maybe spend some money on some coaching, or go to the right brokerage who will help you, put you in a position that can give you some leads, right? Splits or not, like, find the people that are going to make good team members for you. It may not be the best time to step out on your own and take all your savings and put into marketing, but it might not be a bad time to find a good team to be on that can help put you in the right position without upping your overhead too much. But I will finish with this, man. I have been in sales a lot. I have sold many different things, from debt settlement, loan modifications, or assisting to that, life insurance policies and some other things. And if you don't believe in what you're selling, don't do it. So if you don't have a passion for it, don't do it. So if you're getting into real estate, I would say simply just for the money, I wouldn't do it. If you're doing it because you believe it's a part of the American dream, and you believe in home ownership and the value of it, and you have a passion for it, and you have a passion for helping people, then I would do it 100%, because I'm going to do it, because I enjoy that part of the job the most. I enjoy the finish line. I really enjoy connecting people to that dream, man, because it's what it is. When we first bought, and that's how I know, we finally bought our home after being a tenant for when I was 18, let's say tenant for 18, 20 years. Hardly getting the deposit back, having to fight to get your deposit back, putting in stairs for people, painting houses, and they don't give you anything back. They don't give you shit back. It was easy for me when I bought my first. Like, I see the value in home ownership, man. I have a piece of something, and I call it the American dream, and we can put value into it. We now have equity built up, even with higher interest rates. And I love that, man. And if I hold it for the next 28 years until it's paid off, for 24 years, in my opinion, whatever happens in between this, it will be up here in that time. If you look at history, it's going to keep going up. So advice, if you have a passion for it and you want to get after it, then do it. If you don't have a passion for it and it's just something you want to tinker with, I probably wouldn't do it.
Matt, this has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. As a final thing, how can people find you if they want to reach out to you to ask for feedback, advice, or anything of the sort?
Well, I'm on Facebook, but it's hard to spell my last name, so you can always find me there. There's one other Matt Amuchastegui out there. Mine has a picture of me and my family on it. Lincoln Homes Inc. is my business, and klamathproperty.com is the website, or liveinkfalls.com. So reach out anytime. You can give me a call, 541-331-1887. Totally fine with that too. Me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram at Mateo Sells Homes. I would love to be a springboard, hear your ideas, and you might have been a springboard for me, man. Because I remain teachable, and I think even a brand new agent has something they can teach me for sure.
And just as a side thing for the listeners or viewers, I will also be linking or be sharing those links that Matt just spoke about in the description below. So if you want to reach out to him or see his information, find him online or whatever it is, you can either do any of the things that Matt just suggested or check the description below. So thank you again, Matt, for coming on the show, and we look forward to having you again next time.